I hope you have already discovered the TV episodes on the life and mission of Jesus, a very recent production entitled The Chosen by Dallas Jenkins. They continue to produce more episodes. If you have not discovered it yet, I suggest you download it because they're being shown for free, or you might want to make a donation. I'm very impressed about the way each episode has been prepared, and I think he has very good researchers. You know that I love to use my imagination in reading between the lines of the scriptures, and I think Dallas Jenkins has read quite a lot between the lines in today's gospel. One of the most recent episodes in his second season of this mega production is dedicated to Saint Bartholomew. In that particular episode, Bartholomew is portrayed as a frustrated architect. He designs structures that are impressively beautiful on paper. But when he actually constructs them, they turn out to be wrong, unstable, even dangerous. And in that episode, the worst crisis in his life takes place when one day, one of his designs, the house that he has designed, collapses while it is under construction. And not only does it end up as a pile of rubble, it even causes the death of several construction workers. And you can imagine how devastated Bartholomew is. He takes this terrible tragedy as a sign of the end of his career as an architect. Now, it is next to impossible for him ever to be entrusted by the Romans again with any construction project. Because this man is portrayed as an ambitious architect, trying to mimic the style of the Romans. You know, there is a scene in that episode where he is portrayed like a beaten dog, withdrawing into solitude, licking his wounds, totally devastated and disillusioned about his life, feeling like a miserable failure. And what does he do? He decides to burn all his architectural designs. Where? Under a fig tree. And he even looks up at the fig tree and entertains the thought of hanging himself, of committing suicide. But he couldn't do it. He looks up to heaven instead and cries out to heaven, pours out a lament, and asks God to take his life. Parang si Elijah baga. But he falls asleep. And when he wakes up, lo and behold, who is there? Philip. Our gospel today. Philip, excitedly telling him, we have found the Messiah. He is Jesus from the town of Nazareth. And you know the rest of the story. Bartholomew is reacting in a very cold, cynical way. But he goes with Philip anyway. And when he actually meets with Jesus, something happens. His disposition changes radically. He is taken aback about the things that Jesus says to him. And he's probably thinking to himself, who is this man? How come he speaks like he has known me for a long time when we have just met now? And what surprises him most is that Jesus calls him a true Israelite, a true child of Israel, and that there is no duplicity in him. I think when Jesus said that, he was smiling. Kasi, well, I'll tell you in a while. Because Jesus seemed to be aware of a crisis that this man is going through. And Bartholomew is asking, how could he know? How could he know that I have just undergone the worst crisis of my life under a fig tree? The most crushing failure in his life that made him realize the senselessness of pretending to be a good architect, which he was not. How could this Jesus have known what happened to him when he almost decided to end his life, not just his career? John is describing for us a conversion experience, a turning point in the life of Bartholomew. And what strikes Bartholomew most is that Jesus is comparing him to Jacob, who will be called Israel. He is making a parallelism between the turning point in the life of Jacob, who will become Israel, and the turning point in the life of Bartholomew, who would become Nathanael. A conversion experience. Like Jacob, Bartholomew was also at that phase in his life when he found himself forced by circumstances to let go of his ambitions, ambitious character, to shed off his pretentious ways and his deceitful kind of personality, to become a new person. Maybe that is why there are legends about Bartholomew being skinned alive. I think it's meant to be figurative. He had to, he had to divest himself of his old personality. Pero kailangan ng konting background to be able to appreciate what's going on with Bartholomew. Why he would suddenly shift in his reaction. He was just, cynical a while ago. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Then suddenly, after Jesus, says, I saw you under a fig tree, he says, Rabbi, you're the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Masyadong mabilis yung swing, We need a little background to understand the turning point. This moment in his life that would lead him to discover what his mission is about. And ang susi to understand it is Jacob. Jacob's dream. You have to go back to the book of Genesis and read the story of Jacob. The dream of Jacob. He saw a stairway to heaven, and he saw angels going up and going down. You remember, the young Jacob was not a man with no duplicity. That's Israel. The later Israel would mature. But the younger Jacob, he was ambitious. He was pretentious. He was a cheater. He deceived his father, Isaac, when Isaac was almost blind. And, his partner in crime was his mother, Rebecca, who wanted him to get the blessing of the firstborn instead of Esau. And when Esau came to ask for the blessing of the firstborn, Isaac said, I'm sorry, I've given it to your brother. Galit si Esau. He swore to take a revenge, to kill his brother. That is why Jacob is running away. And what would lead to the conversion of Jacob? Fast forward many, many years later, he thought he would never see his brother again. One day, he would cross paths with his brother. Ang pinaka-iwas-iwas niya, makakatagpo niya. And the night before the encounter, he has a dream. And that is the dream that would change his life. The dream of his mission. He is being called to be the stairway between heaven and earth, with angels ascending and descending. He would have to learn and discover the dynamics of ascent and descent in order to fulfill his mission, to become the people of the covenant. He has to build a people. Sabi nila, in Roman culture, there are 3 criteria for building a structure. How do you know if a building is a good piece of architecture? 3 criteria. 3 criteria. The Latin words are, number 1, firmitas. Number 2, utilitas. Number 3, venustas. In English, firmitas is stability. Utilitas is functionality, usefulness. Venustas is beauty. A good piece of architecture should not just be beautiful, it should be functional. And above all, it should be stable. If it collapses with one earthquake, how can it be a good piece of architecture? I was saying this at San Bartholomew Church this morning. I celebrated Mass at San Bartholomew Church. And it has withstood the test of time for hundreds of years and still standing. It must be a good piece of architecture. It's also beautiful and very functional up to now. Well, this is what Bartholomew would learn now from Jesus. Because his problem is he focused only on beauty and forgot about strength and functionality. And he would meet Jesus just when he is feeling like a miserable failure. What he did not learn from architecture, he would learn through his discipleship to Jesus. But in order to do that, he would have to shed off his pretentiousness, his deceitfulness, his falsehood, in order to grow into an authentic person. By taking part in the mission of Jesus, he would discover what he failed to discover in architecture. Like Jacob, who becomes Israel only after understanding his mission. Same with Bartholomew. He would meet that turning point in his life when he would become a Nathanael, which literally means a gift of God. He would become a new person, but this time he would join the bridge or the stairway. In the Old Testament, the stairway is Israel, the people of the covenant. In the New Testament, it's going to be the Son of Man. But the lesson is, Bartholomew also has to learn the 2 movements. Kasi all his life, he was a social climber, trying to ascend. Now Jesus would teach him to descend. You remember Zacchaeus? Come down, Zacchaeus. This is the lesson. If you want to take part in the mission of the bridge or the ladder, who is Christ, the Son of Man. Remember the Son of Man. The Son of God embraced our humanity and descended to become the Son of Man, so that we who are sons and daughters of human beings will be ascended into sons and daughters of God. The new mission that Bartholomew would discover at this important turning point in his life is also the mission that is being entrusted to the rest of us, members of the body of Christ.